Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lynn. If not, welcome back. For today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my observations over the last couple of years on what Hoyas grow best in soil, what Hoyas grow best in semi-hydro, and what Hoyas have zero preference whatsoever. If that sounds exciting to you, keep on watching. So if you've been watching my videos for a while now, you probably already know this about me, but I grow my Hoyas in a variety of substrates. I have Hoyas in pure cocoa chunks, I have Hoyas in my loose chunky soil mix, I have Hoyas in semi-hydro, and within the semi-hydro realm, I have Hoyas in lacquer balls, mini clay balls, random garden rocks, pond, bonsai rocks, all kinds of semi-hydro substrates. All of that is to say that I have gathered quite a lot of anecdotal data based on N equals 1. And I have some observations to share with you. Again, the experience might differ from person to person depending on your environment. So before we move on with the rest of the video, I need to establish my growing conditions. So most of my Hoyas are grown indoors. In summer, very rarely, I will put like maybe 10 Hoya species outside. And I'll cover that in a different video when it starts getting warm again, like what Hoyas are good for outside. But most of my Hoyas are grown indoors, I would say like 70 to 80% of the time, and if not 100% of the time. So my indoor growing conditions are 65 degrees to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. In summer, when we don't turn on the AC, it might go up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit indoors. For my Celsius friends, I'll put that on the screen somewhere, but honestly, like 18 degrees Celsius to like 28 degrees Celsius indoors sounds about right to me. For my humidity, I only turn on my humidifiers during winter or like very, very late fall when it starts getting cold outside and my heaters start turning on. So my humidity indoors is always above 40%. I would say on average it's about 50% since I've moved to Michigan, but back when I was in Kansas, it's always on average 40% during winter. And then in summer, the humidity can go up to like 60-70%. It depends on like what's happening that day. That is to say, my humidity indoors is always above 40%. Lighting conditions. Most of my Hoyas do grow under artificial grow lights. So they're on just like a full spectrum grow light, 12 hours a day, nothing special over there. And then I also do have some Hoyas that I don't have a ton of windows. So I do have some Hoyas that are growing on a windowsill, like an east-facing windowsill, if not a west-facing windowsill, but behind a heavily tinted window. So I do have Hoyas growing under natural light, but most of my Hoyas do grow under artificial grow lights. So we talked about temps, humidity, lighting conditions, and then the last domain that I think needs to be clarified in terms of like environment, I think the X factor is me, right? Because my watering habits and my growing habits are going to be very different from yours. You might be similar to me or you might be completely different from me, I don't know. But I tend to be an overwaterer, so things tend to be pretty wet in my home. And so my loose chunky soil mix recipe tends to be very, very loose, which is also why I tend to do really well with giant lacquer balls and also like complete cocoa chunk mixes, because I am an overwaterer. If you're an underwaterer, then some semi-hydro substrates might not be so good for you because lacquer balls do dry out really, really fast. And cocoa chunks also do dry out really, really fast. So it really depends on these 4 factors, like I already mentioned: temperature, humidity, lighting, and honestly yourself. Like that makes up your environment for your plants. Now that we've established my growing conditions and my growing environment, I can then tell you what I've observed in my time. And honestly, my observations might differ from yours because our environments might be different. Take the information that you learn from this video with like a level of skepticism and make sure you watch other videos online and follow other channels online and other Instagram accounts online so you can get like an aggregate understanding of Hoyas. And then experiment on your own. Like there is no one size fits all. There is no magic formula. Like honestly, I want you to remember, because a lot of people ask me questions like, how often do you water your plants? There is no singular answer. It really depends on your environment. It depends on the substrate. It depends on the plant, because some Hoyas are voracious growers and are thirstier. Some Hoyas are extremely slow growers and are not as thirsty. So all of these factors are going to come into the watering schedule, and similarly with the care schedule. And so my observations in terms of what Hoya prefers semi-hydro, what Hoya prefers soil mix, and what Hoya doesn't prefer anything might differ from your experience. And if it does, please comment down below and I would love to hear it. So that was an incredibly long introduction, but let's get on with the video. So I will be touching on 4 plants that I think do better in semi-hydro, and 5 plants that do better in soil, and 4 that have no preference. And I will timestamp all of these things in this video so you can like skip ahead to like anything that you want to pay attention to. One huge disclaimer I need to say before we move on with the rest of the video is the fact that all of these Hoyas can grow in soil or semi-hydro. So when I say that I've noticed a preference, I'm not talking about like that it doesn't grow at all in soil or it doesn't grow at all in semi-hydro. They all survive in both semi-hydro and soil mix, and they do relatively well. But I have noticed that certain Hoyas do prefer one medium over the other. And when I say they do prefer, I mean that I notice like better growth, more stable growth, faster growth, nicer looking leaves, stuff along those lines. So when I say better, I don't mean they don't survive in that other medium. They just seem to grow faster in one particular medium over the other, and I have noticed a preference. But if you love semi-hydro or if you love soil, all of them are still going to grow well in soil or semi-hydro. So don't worry about that. They just do have like a slight preference when it comes to certain mediums that I've noticed in my care under my conditions. The first Hoya I want to talk about in the semi-hydro list is the Hoya Snow Kiwi Splash. This is an extremely fast grower. It's a voracious grower, and it's a very thirsty Hoya as a result. Fast-growing Hoyas tend to suck up more water, and because of its nature, it prefers semi-hydro. I grow mine in a full semi-hydro cup. It is completely lacquer balls. There's nothing else but lacquer balls. And as you can see, there are so many roots. It's been in this cup for a really long time now, probably more than a year. And it just loves semi-hydro. It grew so much better than it did originally when it came in soil. So when I first got this plant, it did come in soil and it just didn't grow as well as it does in semi-hydro. So this is one of those Hoyas that just is very thirsty and would prefer a semi-hydro setup in a closed container setup because it just wicks up and drinks up so much water. So if you're an underwaterer, this is maybe one plant to not get perhaps, because the watering requirements are going to be slightly higher. That said, it is pretty resistant to drought as well. I know I'm saying like conflicting things, but it has a pretty juicy, chunky, succulent leaf, and that makes it more resistant to underwaterers than like a finer leaf Hoya like the Hoya Bella, for example. So I wouldn't say like don't get this if you're a chronic underwaterer, but just be aware that it is a much thirstier Hoya and would benefit from semi-hydro. My Hoya Lei no ID. I have featured this Hoya so many times on my channel now, and it's the same with the Hoya Snow Kiwi Splash. It grows extremely well in semi-hydro. So my Hoya Lei no ID is similarly grown in a completely full semi-hydro setup in with lacquer balls in a closed container setup, and it's been enjoying and loving that setup. It grows really fast. It's very thirsty. It's the same thing. The leaves are succulent but not super chunky, and it just drinks up so much water because it's such a fast grower. So that is my second Hoya that I've noticed grows really well in semi-hydro. The next Hoya I want to talk about is the Hoya lacunosa tricolor. So most lacunosas, or rather almost all lacunosas, I want to say, are very thirsty Hoyas. They are finer leaf, they are thinner, not quite as succulent, and they just grow so voraciously, and so they drink up a lot of water. Because of that, my Hoya lacunosa tricolor, honestly, I originally had that plant in a loose chunky soil mix, and I went on a conference for 5 days and it died. Like, it was so close to dying, everything dry rotted, and I snipped like one strand off like the ends, and that was all I had of the original plant. And I basically propagated until I ended up with like this lush mother plant again. And ever since I moved it into a semi-hydro full lacquer setup, it has just been thriving and doing so well. Recently, it's just been blooming non-stop. Like, I've had 6 or 7 different blooms now on the Hoya lacunosa tricolor while it's in semi-hydro, and I am never looking back. It's just doing so well in semi-hydro, so I cannot recommend it enough. The next Hoya that I want to talk about is the Denisii Frida. This Hoya just does so well in semi-hydro. Like, I rooted it out in fluval, and honestly, the leaves are so soft. They are so soft, so thin. The stems are also so soft, so thin. It is crying out to be placed in a semi-hydro setup. I mean, obviously, you can definitely grow this in a loose, chunky soil mix, I'm pretty sure, but it just does so well in semi-hydro. It's loving the semi-hydro setup. It is an extremely fast grower. It blooms like crazy, and mine is growing in a closed container setup in full semi-hydro in lacquer balls. And yeah, it's a very, very thirsty Hoya, and because of that, it also does really well in a full semi-hydro setup. So this is the last semi-hydro Hoya that I'll be talking about, and then next we'll move on to the soil. The first Hoya that I want to talk about that just really does prefer soil more than semi-hydro is the Hoya insularis. This is a really, really cool looking Hoya. Like, the leaves are just like spiny, they're like thick and succulent, and they have a central rib that's going down the middle, and it's very dark and gothic looking. I do really enjoy this Hoya a lot. I first received it in soil, and then it grew root mealies very early on. I'm not sure if it's from the seller, but to be honest, it just grew root mealies really early on. And so I chopped everything down, threw away the entire pot, and then I restarted it in fluval. And eventually I potted it up in my semi-hydro setup, which is, I mean, this is an old queso dip. But it's in a full semi-hydro setup, in a closed container setup with lacquer balls. And again, like I said in the beginning of this video, when I say they have a preference, it doesn't mean that they cannot grow in semi-hydro. I mean, look at this plant, it's healthy, it's growing well in semi-hydro. But I have noticed a preference. It definitely grew a lot faster in loose chunky soil mix than it does in semi-hydro, and that is a fact. It's just a fact. It just grows a lot faster in loose chunky soil mix compared to semi-hydro. That said, as you can see, it survives and still does pretty well in semi-hydro, but it definitely has a preference for soil. So this is the first one that I will highly recommend going out in loose chunky soil mix instead of semi-hydro if you are trying to decide between the two and your growing conditions are similar to mine. So the next Hoya I want to talk about that I also think much prefers soil over semi-hydro is the Hoya obovata. I think like during fall, I chopped out like a bunch of like splashy notes from my Hoya obovata mother plant in the hopes of like growing out more splashy specimens. But to be honest, it rooted out really well in fluval and also in like a water propping tube. But after I moved them to semi-hydro, they just kind of stopped. Like, they are really slow. I mean, they do grow, but they're just like really slow. They don't look great. Let me take one out to show you. So this one over here is going in a full lacquer ball setup, and I mean, it doesn't look the best. The leaves sometimes come out like weird, and it's just so much slower than my obovata mother plant that grows in loose chunky soil mix. So the Hoya obovata definitely does prefer soil over semi-hydro. But again, as I've said before, it doesn't mean that they don't survive and do well in a semi-hydro setup. I mean, it's still a healthy looking plant. It's still a healthy specimen. It does, however, grow faster in soil. The next Hoya I want to talk about is the Hoya latifolia silver. So I've grown out my Hoya latifolias mostly in soil, but just for the silver, I decided to do semi-hydro. And to be honest, it's the least happy in semi-hydro when compared to my other latifolias that are growing in either like full loose chunky soil mix or like just straight up cocoa chunks. All of those other latifolias do a lot better than the semi-hydro ones. So I do recommend maybe you can root it up in like a water prop or like in soil if that's like your preference. But it rooted up beautifully for me in fluval, but I would recommend growing it in soil over semi-hydro just because, I don't know, it doesn't seem to enjoy that medium that much. And I'm procrastinating right now, like hardcore. I'm like legit procrastinating, but I think I should probably unpot my Hoya latifolia silvers from their semi-hydro prisons and move them into soil mix. But maybe I'll do that when like the weather is nicer and I can just like make a mess outdoors. Like, but right now it's just like snowing and hailing and raining and gusting, and I just don't want to be outside. So, but yeah, the Hoya ledifolia silver, definitely a Hoya that prefers being in soil. It does well in semi-hydro. Actually, no, this might be the only Hoya that doesn't actually do well in semi-hydro. It still grows, but very slow, and the growth sometimes it's like weird and wonky, but yeah, definitely one for soil. The next Hoya I want to talk about is the Hoya Gunung Gadings, and I think this applies to both the Hoya Gunung Gading Ghost and also the regular Hoya Gunung Gading. I have a Hoya Gunung Gading Ghost. This is one of them in loose chunky soil mix. I rooted this out in fluval. It did beautifully in fluval, and then I moved it into loose chunky soil mix. And again, my other Hoya Gunung Gading that is going in a full semi-hydro setup in full lacquer balls also grows. I mean, like, it's not a bad grower. It looks really healthy. It's definitely growing. But I will say the Hoya Gunung Gading Ghost grows a lot faster in a full chunky soil mix than it does in semi-hydro. That is definitely something I've noticed. Like this little cutting over here that I potted up like maybe a month ago, it's already turned out like these 2 brand new leaves, and I have like 1, 2, 3 more leaves on the way. My other Hoya Gunung Gading Ghost that's in the semi-hydro setup has grown like maybe 1 leaf in that entire time. So because of that, I do highly recommend just like leaving it in soil instead of semi-hydro. My regular Gunung Gading, I mean, it doesn't look okay. So my original Gunung Gading was heavily traumatized when I first moved from Kansas to Michigan, because again, it was in the back of a really hot truck. The leaves touched the side of the truck and melted off basically. So I had to, and then like a month after we moved, it developed like root mealies. Maybe it was stressed out and it was like more susceptible to root mealies, but it developed root mealies. So I chopped off everything, restarted from scratch, and then threw the base pot away. And then I had this grand idea to move it into semi-hydro. So this is in semi-hydro. I mean, again, look at it. It's not doing poorly. It's healthy, it's glossy, it's churning out leaves. But I have grown this in full loose chunky soil mix before the semi-hydro iteration, and I will say it also grows a lot faster in loose chunky soil mix than semi-hydro. So this is definitely a plant that like prefers semi-hydro. You can definitely grow it in semi-hydro, but if you prefer soil, then this is definitely one to not try in semi-hydro. I think it just does so much better in soil than semi-hydro. The last Hoya I want to mention for preferring soil over semi-hydro are my Hoya polyneurus, and I will say this applies to all of the Hoya polyneurus, the regular Hoya polyneura, the inner variegated polyneura, the outer variegated polyneura, and the jasminca. Like, obviously my Hoya polyneurus do really well in both semi-hydro and soil, and like that's like video evidence that they do well in both. But I have to say, like, now that I've had them for like a few years, Hoya polyneurus really do prefer soil over semi-hydro. They're going to grow well in both, but I do think they bloom faster. I mean, I have 2 side-by-side pots, and all of my polyneurus in the soil mix blooms faster before the semi-hydro at a much faster rate than the semi-hydro one. And it just looks better, I think. And again, that's like super subjective, but I do think in terms of like rate of growth and time to bloom, the Hoya polyneurus definitely do prefer soil over semi-hydro. Also, like when it comes to the Hoya jasminca, I think especially the Hoya jasminca is like probably the most obvious case out of the family of Hoya polyneurus. Like my friend grows out her Hoya polyneura jasminca in soil mix, and hers just grow like so much faster than mine. And I think we have like the same grow lights and really similar growing conditions, and hers just grow like so much faster than mine. And both of my Hoya polyneura jasmincas are both growing in semi-hydro. So I've been wondering, well, I don't have to wonder. I have like 2 more rooted Hoya jasmincas that are like sitting in my prop box right now that need a new home, and I'll probably root them up not root them up, I'll probably transfer them into like a loose chunky soil mix instead of semi-hydro, because it's quite evident to me that they just grow better in loose chunky soil mix compared to semi-hydro. So those are my 5 Hoya case examples that grow better in soil mix over semi-hydro. And then now I'm going to move on to 4 more case examples that I've noticed have absolutely zero preference whatsoever. The first one I want to talk about is the Hoya chinghunggensis. The Hoya chinghunggensis is such a lovely, lovely, lovely Hoya, and I cannot emphasize this enough. If you don't have the Hoya chinghunggensis, go out and get yourself one ASAP. I have the Hoya chinghunggensis regular form, so like just green, and also the inner variegated form. And I can tell you without a doubt now, because I have experimented with both the soil mix and the semi-hydro, and for the regular form and the inner variegated form, and they grow well in both mixes. They grow well in like 40% humidity. They also grow well in like a prop box environment where it's like a much higher humidity. They grow well in a semi-hydro leca setup. They grow well in a pond setup. They also grow well in a loose chunky soil mix. Like, I have not noticed any differences in the rate of growth whatsoever. So the Hoya chinghunggensis is definitely one of my top Hoyas. Like, in general, it's just such a lovely plant to have. It's just so easygoing. But also it roots pretty easily, the regular form. The inner variegated form is harder to root, and you will definitely need to root it in a prop box. But they do grow really well once they're rooted up. So either semi-hydro or loose chunky soil mix will do really well. The next Hoya that also has no preference is the Hoya Matilde Splash. The Hoya Matilde Splash I have grown in semi-hydro with just like leca balls. I've also grown it in pond. And I also have like 2 different specimens growing in loose chunky soil mix. One is in a terracotta pot. The other one is in a plastic pot, and they both grow extremely well. So when it comes to the Hoya Matilde Splash, you can grow it in anything, and I'm convinced that it will grow well. So it has zero preference whatsoever. The next Hoya that I've also noticed has no preference because I've grown it in a loose chunky soil mix, like a small little 3-inch pot, and I've also grown it in my semi-hydro setup. And it's the Hoya Serpens. The Hoya Serpens grows really well in both setups. It buds up really fast. It hasn't bloomed for me just yet, but it does have a lot of peduncles on right now. And I think it just grows really well in both setups. Hoya Tangamus. So if you've been watching my videos recently, you'll see my new YouTube short where I featured my Hoya Tangamus, where I grew them from like just a 1-note 2-leaf rooted soil cutting, and I took cuttings off of that, and then I propagated that, and then I grew it in semi-hydro, and both of my mother plants are just like so lush, and they grow so well, and they grow at the same rate. So Hoya Tangamus, species Tangamus, is another plant that I think grows well in both conditions. With that, we've come to the end of today's video. So I hope that today's video was entertaining for you and interesting for you to find out like what my experiences are when it comes to growing different Hoyas out in both semi-hydro and loose chunky soil mix, and what I've noticed made a difference. Again, as I have provided multiple disclaimers now, I am but one grower. I don't own a greenhouse. I grow almost everything indoors, and I don't have like one favorite medium. So everything depends on my growing conditions, myself as a grower. So as you listen to all of this information, make sure you're taking it in with the understanding that the environment plays a huge factor. So what works for me might not work for you, but if your environment conditions are very similar to mine, they could work for you. The other huge disclaimer I keep saying is that it doesn't mean, when I say they have a preference over the other, it doesn't mean that they don't grow well in soil at all, or they don't grow in semi-hydro at all. They grow well in both. I have noticed that most Hoyas can survive in both mediums, and they do pretty well in both mediums. But for these particular case studies, I have noticed that one does prefer the other just a little bit more in terms of rate of growth or time to bloom, stuff like that. And the final disclaimer I'm going to say is that this list is by no means exhaustive in any way. I'm just trying to keep the video like not 3 hours long. So I decided to share, I think, probably shared like 13 case examples. So I hope this video was fun for you, and it was something that was entertaining and interesting, and that you learned something from this entire video. Comment down below if you have other views on this topic. I would love to hear them. If you liked today's video, please hit the like button. And then if you are interested to subscribe, please subscribe to the channel. So thank you once again for your attention. Have a wonderful day. As always, I'll see you next time. Bye.